I built over 10 sales teams from scratch and closed well into 8 figures in collective revenue across high-ticket info, coaching, and service offers. And in this video, I'm going to show you the one thing that took a client's team from a 10% close rate all the way to a 50% close rate consistently over 3 years while raising prices. And we did not do this by training the team on objection handling or fancy closing techniques that you see all over Instagram. It's a simple but powerful 4-step discovery checklist that's been the secret to our teams being able to close more deals with almost no objection handling. And so often when I audit sales teams that are stuck below 20% close rate, bleeding money on ads, can't scale past 100 or 200 grand a month because their ROAS isn't high enough, almost every time the problem is the same thing. They're trying to fix and tweak the close when the real issue is what happened in the discovery. And here's what I mean by that. So we took over this client who was doing 5 figures a month in revenue, and their close rate was sitting around 10-15% depending on the sales rep. We reviewed the call recordings and just immediately saw what was wrong. The reps were just asking random questions, just kind of ticking the boxes of, oh, I guess I have to do the discovery, and then finally just launching into a pitch where it just had zero connection to what the prospect actually said. And so the prospect would sit through the whole pitch and say, well, I guess I need to think about it. And the whole team was complaining that, we need more objection handling training. But that was not their problem. So we rebuilt the team, implemented our 4-step discovery framework, and within a year, we hit a $340,000 a month. On top of that, we stabilized the close rate between 45 to 55%, even though we raised prices twice during that period, roughly about a 50% increase from when we first took over. So I'm gonna walk you through exactly what those 4 steps are, why they work, and how you can implement them with your team. Now let me be clear about one thing. This is not another become a high-ticket closer video. I'm not a coach selling you any sales training course. I run a company called Closing Consulting, where we build, staff, and actually run the entire sales operations for different high-ticket info, coaching, and service businesses. And across our teams, we've closed well into 8 figures in collective revenue. And I'm talking to you as the operator who sits on top of all these teams and has to make them produce as an organization. And what I keep seeing time and time again is that when close rates suck, the answer is almost never better objection handling. The answer is fixing what happens or implementing what doesn't happen in the discovery. So let me show you how we do this. Let me start off with an analogy that explains this. If you cook a meal and it turns out like shit, the issue probably wasn't what you did in the last 5 minutes. It wasn't the sprinkle of seasoning at the end. It was how you prepared the meal, what ingredients you started with, whether you set yourself up to succeed before you ever turn on the heat on the pan. And sales calls work the exact same way. The last 10 minutes, the close, that's just the final touches, the push over the edge. But everyone's obsessed with it, thinking that there's some quick fix to just close more deals and make more money. And this is also why all those curly-haired sales gurus on Instagram teach you how to deal with the spouse objection, because it's a quick fix promising easy money. And so people watch the recordings, skip to the objection, and think, well, if I just had a better response to, I need to think about it, I will close more deals. But that is not how sales works, because the prospect was never in a mental state where buying made sense. They weren't sold, they weren't even close. And here's what actually happens on a bad call. So the rep asks a few surface level questions like, what made you book a call today? What are you hoping to get out of this? Get some vague answers, nods along, ask a couple follow-ups, and then just can't wait to get into the pitch. And I get it, because they're sitting there thinking, well, I know this offer is just so amazing, and if you can just show them how good it is, they're gonna end up buying. And so they rush through the discovery because it kind of feels like a formality, like the thing you have to do before you get to the real stuff, like where you're actually gonna be selling. But the thing is that discovery is the real stuff. This is where the magic happens. This is the whole foundation of the close. This is where you earn the right to go through with the pitch, and also where you know how to personalize the pitch to that prospect. And so if you pitch before discovery is complete, you're just trying to close someone who you don't actually know if they're the right fit for the offer, and you don't know what the impact of this solution will have on their life specifically. It just doesn't make sense. So what does this 4-step discovery process actually look like? Well, here they are. First of all, a clearly defined and burning problem, then a real commitment to solving it now. Third, an admission they need help. And lastly, a reason to want help from you specifically. And that's it. If you go through all these 4 steps consistently and successfully, the pitch actually makes sense for the prospect because they're now in the mental state where buying is the next logical step. But if one or more is missing, you're pitching someone who isn't really ready, and you're gonna get hit with objections after objections that just feel impossible to overcome. So let me break down each step of this process a little bit more in detail. So step 1 is to define a real burning problem that the prospect is sitting with. And the problem is what's holding someone back from bridging the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Now there are 3 components to properly defining this problem. Number 1 is that current state. Where are you right now? and be specific about it. Get the numbers, really dig in. And then you got to understand the desired state. Where do you actually want to be? And what does that look like for you specifically? Get specific here. Timelines, exactly what they want. And then thirdly, it's the consequences. What happens if nothing changes? And what happens if you do fix it? Why is this desired state so important to you? Let me give you an example from a real estate coaching offer that we work on. So a current situation might be, I own 0 properties. I've been trying to find deals for the last 6 months, but I haven't pulled the trigger on anything. The desired state is I want to build a portfolio worth $5 million or more with about $15,000 per month in net cash flow so that I can quit my job, go all in on real estate, and actually be present with my kids. Now, the negative consequences of not fixing this is, well, if I don't figure this out, I'm gonna be stuck in a job that I hate. I'm gonna miss my kids growing up. And 10 years from now, I'll look back and regret that I never took action. Now, if you do something about it, the positive consequences are, well, I'm gonna be able to buy my freedom. I get my time back. I build something real that's gonna take care of me and my family for years, maybe even generations to come. And so now we can name the actual problem. The problem is that there's a gap in your knowledge or in your skill set that's keeping you from finding and executing on these investments that would actually take you to your goal. And this is why you haven't made any meaningful progress solving this problem in the last 6 months. And this is a well-defined problem. But here's what's even more important. It's a problem that's completely within the prospect's control. They can't just keep blaming the market or external factors or the lack of inventory that's out on the market. Because if they want to reach their goal, they have to take ownership of what's actually in the way. And once they do that, they're also empowered to fix it. And then step 2 is to get a real commitment to solving this problem now. Not, it would be nice, but an actual commitment. And here's a simple way to do this. On a scale from 1 to 10, how serious are you actually about fixing this in the next 6 to 12 months? And if they say, I don't know, maybe a 6, and start talking about, I want to do this after the summer or when things calm down or other bullshit like that, that's not a commitment. That's just daydreaming. And there is 0 point spending 20 to 30 minutes pitching to someone who isn't serious and committed to changing anything. First of all, they're not going to listen attentively. And then they'll just say, sounds great, let me think about it. Not because your close was weak or it was a bad pitch, but because they were never going to make a change today anyways. So the rep needs a clear verbal commitment that this is a real problem, they want it solved, and why now is the right time. And this is important. Not because the rep needs to check the box, but because the prospect needs to make a decision that they are actually ready to solve the problem before we can start looking at a solution. And if the rep can't get that, they should not move on to the pitch. It's as simple as this. Now, once you have a defined problem and you've gotten a commitment that they want to do something about it now, then step 3 is to get them to admit that they need help with the solution. And this is the step most teams don't even realize that they're missing. Because you can have a prospect with a clear problem and a real commitment, but if they think that they can solve it on their own, they're not going to pay you thousands of dollars to fix it. And most prospects, when they're stuck, they don't blame themselves. They blame the market, timing, the economy, the platform they've been using, literally anything except themselves. And if they don't believe that they are part of the reason they're stuck, they will not believe they need help. And so the rep's job is to guide them gently to then realize, okay, there's something in how I've been thinking about this that just isn't working. I haven't been able to figure this out on my own yet. And here's the key. You don't achieve that by arguing with them or butting heads. You use questions and you use labels. And here's an example that we see constantly happening. So the prospect says, well, my only problem is that I just can't seem to find good real estate deals. The market is just too competitive right now. It's not a good timing. Something economy. Now the closer can then say, okay, so the only thing that's holding you back from building this portfolio that's going to give you everything you want is you've been looking for a few months and you just haven't found the perfect deal. Is that it? So you're not arguing, you're feeding their logic back to them. You're making them revisit their logic and actually start thinking more deeply about it. And then you can follow up. Well, do you think that there are people in your exact market and kind of same situation as you who are looking at the same platforms, who have found great deals in the last few months, who have bought a property and who are making money with it? And if yes, so then there are 2 people in the same market. You haven't found anything, but they have. What do you think explains that difference? And so it's not about making them feel stupid, but you're leading them to see for themselves that, yeah, there is something I don't know, or there is something I'm not doing right. And this is the moment where I want this becomes, I definitely need some help with this because I don't want to mess around anymore. And until they get there, they're just looking for information. They're not looking to make a decision. And the last step, why should they want your help specifically? Because if the prospect has no idea who you are, they haven't seen your content, your proof, your results, they don't see any difference between you and 10 other options, then you're just another sales rep making a pitch. And they're gonna go shopping to compare different offers to see what kind of prices and bonuses people have. So you need them thinking before you pitch, well, if I'm gonna do this, I wanna do it with these people. I wanna do it with you. And so the sales reps need to ask questions like, what made you book a call with us specifically? What have you seen or heard about us so far? And based on that, why do you think that we might be able to help? And if the answer is, I don't know, I just clicked on an ad, that's fine. But now before you can transition to the pitch, you need to establish credibility. You need to show them what you actually do, who you've helped, what results you've created. So that by the time you pitch, it's not here's some random offer, it's here's how we, the people that you now trust, can solve this specific problem that you just told me about. And so when all these four are done right, so you have a clearly defined and a burning problem with real consequences, a real commitment to solving it now, an admission that they need help, and finally, a reason to want help from you specifically, well, now the pitch makes sense. And the close becomes easy because you spend all this time setting it up right, getting the prospect in the right mindset, getting them ready to make a change and make a decision. Okay, so you got the framework. Here's how we actually get the reps to use it. First of all, we make it physical. So we have all the reps keep a notebook, a simple one or a nice one like this, that they use on every single call. And so at the top, they write discovery, pitch, close. And under discovery, they write problem, commitment, need help, why us? And as they run the call, they put a check mark next to each one when they genuinely have completed that part of the call. And they do not move into the pitch until all four of these are checked in the discovery. It's stupid simple, but it's incredibly effective because it forces them to slow down and actually do the discovery instead of just getting excited and rushing into the pitch and blowing the whole sale. Second, we review calls through this lens. So when myself or a manager listens to recordings, we're listening specifically for things like, did they define a real problem? Or did they just accept some vague wish? Did they get a real clear commitment? Or did they just tiptoe around it? And did the prospect ever admit that they need help? Or did the rep just assume they do? And finally, did they establish why us? Or did they pitch to someone who has not really built a lot of trust with us? And you're gonna see patterns emerge instantly when you review calls this way. And most low close rates come back to this. Reps are pitching when they only have one or two of the four in place. And so all these objections you get at the end right now, they're just downstream symptoms of a broken discovery process. So fix this, and a surprising number of those objections are just gonna disappear entirely. And look, I've personally coached over 100 closers on this exact framework. And here's what happens when you run discovery this way. You don't need high pressure sales tactics because a prospect genuinely feels like they are the one making their own decision. It's an internal drive because it actually is. And what that does is lets us close more deals, produce more revenue for client. And also every single person who gets on a call will leave thinking, this was a really good conversation. I like this company, whether they buy or not. And that's the key. This is really the difference between building a sales operation that scales and one that burns out and burns your reputation in the process. And if you're a business owner who's running a high ticket info, coaching, or service business, you're doing $100,000 a month or more, and you want to scale to $500,000 or $1 million a month, then we should talk. Because at Closing Consulting, we build and run your entire sales operation like this, with setters, closers, team leads, systems, KPIs, CRM, like the whole shebang. And we know how to scale your sales operation because that is what we do every day, all day. And we have access to the best talent out there. We know how to build the systems that actually produce results. And we do it in a way where your close rates go up without your brand getting destroyed by pushy closers. So if you want to take sales off your plate and scale it past where you are right now, there's a link in the description below. Now, if you're doing less than $100,000 a month, keep watching what we put out. Implement this stuff and then get to $100,000 a month, and then we can talk. And if you're a setter or a closer who wants to work inside of a system like this, instead of buying another sales course, then click the link below and apply to our talent network because we're always looking for A players to join our team.